Maybe you've done the gym membership, the supplements, the journaling, the meditation app you used for exactly 9 days. Maybe you've read all the books, gone to the retreats, set the boundaries, said the affirmations. You have used all the systems for self care. And maybe you've also gone to doctor after doctor trying to figure out what's wrong. You've had your blood drawn so many times, you've lost count and sat across from like really well meaning people who just can't find anything wrong with you. So you've also tried systems for sickness, but your body is still exhausted and in pain. Your mind is still battling self-criticism and shame, and your relationships aren't filled with the love and appreciation that you need. Stick with me to the end of this video, and I'll show you exactly what lies between sickness and self-care and give you a practice to start closing this wellness gap right away. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Atlas. Welcome to Alchemy with Atlas, where we talk about the art and science of transmuting stress and trauma to create a life that's happy, healthy, and whole. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about why systems for self-care and sickness actually work, because in certain contexts, they absolutely do. We all need a foundational practice of self-care, and we all need great doctors and nurses and conventional medicine when we get really sick. So let's start with systems for self-care. Systems for self-care work on a simple premise. You are already well. You have something that you already appreciate and it's already working for you, and you want it to stay that way. This means systems for self-care are rooted in a paradigm of practice, which centralizes maintenance, meaning you use certain practices on a recurring basis to maintain the wellness you already have. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, cleaning your home. Like none of these are trying to fix something broken. They're trying to maintain something that's already working. Systems for sickness, on the other hand, are rooted in a paradigm of pathology, which centralizes medicine. Pathology refers to that which is diseased or disordered in a way that's observable, quantifiable, and categorized according to a threshold agreed upon by the profession. So in other words, you have to have these symptoms in this way for this amount of time, and that means you have X disease, which can be addressed through Y treatment. Diagnostic criteria like those in the ICD and the DSM, treatment protocols, pharmaceuticals, all of these live within the paradigm of pathology and systems for sickness that operate around it. This entire system depends on your symptoms adding up to a recognizable pattern, a number on a lab result, a cluster of criteria in a diagnostic manual, and then we can effectively intervene, right? Now, both of these systems are excellent at what they are built for. Self-care is a foundational core of like keeping what you already have in optimal condition. It's an excellent way to maintain wellness. Systems for sickness are excellent at treating diagnosable diseases. So imaging, tools, surgery, and life-saving medication, it's all incredibly useful and important. So neither system is bad, but each one has a boundary or a limitation to what it's designed to do. And many of us fall into the massive crack between the two. I know because I've been there. For almost 30 years, my body ached, my mind wouldn't quiet down, and my relationships suffered, no matter how much self-care or how many doctors I saw. I know many people find solutions in systems for self-care and systems for sickness, but that's not where my solutions came from. I eventually found the health and happiness that I was longing for through an entirely different system, one that's within my influence all the time. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's lesson. So here's the crack. Self-care assumes you are well enough to maintain your current state. Medicine assumes you're sick enough to diagnose and treat. But what happens if you're neither? What happens if you're not well? You don't have the energy, the clarity, or the ease that self-care is designed to protect and maintain, but you're also not sick in a way conventional testing and imaging can confirm. Your labs come back normal. Your symptoms don't cluster into a diagnosis. Like you get sent home with everything looks fine, even though absolutely nothing feels fine. That's the gap. And most of us don't just like visit the gap occasionally. We actually live in the valley between these two paradigms for years. Self care doesn't reach us because we're not well enough for maintenance for it to matter. And medicine doesn't reach us because we're not sick enough for our experiences to be sort of categorized and contained. So we get told over and over again that nothing is wrong. We're totally fine. It's all in our head, even though we are miserable. And what's worse is that when we hear that over and over again, that there's nothing wrong, even though like there's very much something wrong, right? That's how much it feels like that for us. Many of us start to believe that we're overreacting and we learn to ignore and push through our own pain. Or we start to feel like the life we're living, one where we're suffering alone without solutions. Like some of us start to feel like life isn't worth living at all. If you have been there or you're there right now, I can tell you that life is absolutely worth living. You do not have to stay stuck and alone in the dark valley between the paradigm of practice and the paradigm of pathology, because there's something in between them. And it has everything to do with stress. So that's what we need to talk about next. If this is really resonating with you, please consider joining my free newsletter. Each week, I'll send you insights on being more happy, healthy, and whole. And when you sign up, I'll also send you a free video on separating from others' energy and emotion. The link is in the description if you're interested. Now, talking about stress might feel like a bit of a detour, but stick with me because what I'm about to share with you has the potential to totally change your life. Then again, maybe it won't feel like a detour at all. Many of us already understand that unresolved stress can be problematic. That's why stress management is so important. But knowing unresolved stress is problematic isn't enough. You have to understand the mechanics of how stress actually works. Because once you see the mechanics, the solution, and the system that you have been looking for actually becomes quite obvious. So let's talk about stress. Not the version where you're either stressed or you're not. Like, we're going to actually talk about the actual mechanics of it. Stress, in its simplest form, is pressure to change. It happens anytime something in your life shifts and you have to adapt. A wedding is stress. Your child getting sick is stress. Bad news in your feed is stress. At a very basic level, stress is just something changing and then creating pressure on you for you to change with it. So you have to feel differently, you have to think differently, and you have to act differently in response to that stressor. New energy comes into your life in whatever form that is, and you need to feel, think, and act in ways to respond to it. This means that stress never actually stops. And that's not bad news. If you're experiencing stress, it means your life is continuing to bring you new opportunities to change and evolve. Having stress basically means you're alive, which is a very good thing. So if stress is new energy, which creates the pressure to change, the stress response cycle is the step-by-step process that unfolds within you that allows you to change and evolve along with those situations. So here's the stress response cycle broken down into a very simple sort of 4-step process. Step 1, something changes. This change is what I call a triggering situation since it triggers the stress response cycle. Step 2, feel sensation. Your body responds to the triggering situation by creating a sensation you can feel. And this gives you energy to ultimately respond to it. Step 3, think a story. Next, your mind creates a story to help you understand the situation enough so that you can take action. Step 4, act on a signal. Finally, you act and send out verbal or nonverbal signals into your relationships with objects and others. Ultimately, this is all designed to make an impact on the triggering situation, which discharges the energy in your body-mind relationship system and resets it for the next situation you encounter. Feel, think, act. That loop is designed to run continuously every day for your entire life. And as you can see, ideally, the stress response cycle connects your body, mind, and relationships because your sensations inform your stories, and your sensations and stories inform your signals. But the stress response cycle can unfold in one of 2 ways. It can be integrated, where your body, mind, relationship system actually stays connected, Or it can be interrupted, where they become disconnected. Those two expressions are the difference between a system that stays whole and a system that starts to break down. So let's talk about those two expressions next. This episode is sponsored by the Gravity Point Institute, an education and technology company dedicated to helping humanity become more happy, healthy, and whole. The research is very clear. Self-regulation and stress resolution is an integral part of wellness. But self-regulation never had a unified system, one that organizes and operationalizes the process of keeping your entire human system balanced in a way that's repeatable and reliable. Until now, the Gravity Point Institute was founded to build one. At the center of its work is the Gravity Point Paradigm, a framework mapping 20 stress responses across 10 dimensions of the human system, each having its own method for restoration and balance. The complete framework is actually available now in the Gravity Point Anthology, a book series that blends neuroscience, Vedic sciences, and quantum mechanics to help you transmute stress and trauma to heal your world, so together we can heal our world. The link is in the description if you'd like to learn more. When the stress response cycle is integrated, your body, mind, and relationships stay in constant communication. The sensation in your body informs the story in your mind, and both of those inform the signal you send into your relationships. That's what regulation looks like. So in your body, regulation feels like a steady breath and grounded energy. In your mind, regulation sounds like clear focus and flexible thinking. And in your relationships, regulation shows up as honest engagement, a lot of accountability, and sort of responsive reciprocal connection. But sometimes it's not safe to feel, think, and act the way you naturally would. Sometimes the honest feeling isn't tolerated by the people around you, or the honest thought isn't socially acceptable, or the honest action isn't safe to take. So your system does something very wise and very intelligent. It interrupts the cycle. So it disconnects your body, mind, and relationships from each other. So you end up feeling one thing, thinking another, and doing something else entirely. At a very basic level, this is trauma. So trauma is a wound or disconnection in your system. Although a trauma response can be very difficult, and when we get caught in patterns that are really long-term, right, they can certainly be frustrating. Still, it's important to remember that disconnection is protective. The wound might hurt you, but it also keeps you from feeling, thinking, or acting in a way that might make the situation worse in that moment than the temporary pain that you're experiencing along the way. So hold on to that the next time you feel yourself caught in an old trauma pattern. No matter how irritating or inconvenient it is, your system is trying to protect you by disconnecting your body, mind, relationship system. Now, even though disconnection can serve you, as you might imagine, the act of disconnection, right? That function actually costs your system a lot of energy. When your body, mind, and relationships stop communicating and connecting, which actually takes its own energy, each part has to compensate on its own to make up for that missing information. And that compensation shows up as either activity or underactivity. That's dysregulation. So in your body, let's say there's a break, right? You've got a wound and it's disconnected. If your body is not connected to your mind, your body is not connected to your relationships, it's going to be either in a sympathetic, activated state, trying to figure out what's going on and compulsively acting, or it's going into complete shutdown because it does not feel safe. In your mind, if it's disconnected from your body, for example, that's going to manifest as racing thoughts, like trying to figure out what's going on without that information, or just like a foggy blank page. In your relationships, when you're disconnected, and this one's really important because humans are social creatures, if we don't feel connected and congruent in our relationships, and our relationships don't have access to our body and mind, that's when we're going to be sort of clinging to other people or creating conflict, or at the other end of underactivity, we're going to withdraw and isolate. So that overactivity and underactivity is a dysregulated response that your different dimensions of your system are trying to enact to make up for the fact that it's no longer getting information from the other parts. Now, one interrupted cycle isn't a problem. It's actually very adaptive. That's your system being very smart in a moment that called for it, right? You couldn't be connected, you couldn't be congruent. The problem is what happens when interruption is not then reconnected. Interruption doesn't go back into an integrated state, and interruption becomes your default. So when your stress response cycle interrupts itself on autopilot, that's when we get into problematic patterns. So when interruption becomes your system's default, disconnection and dysregulation become continuous states. It's like your default mode network. And holding that disconnection in place and actually not reconnecting takes real constant effort. Your system wants to be integrated. That is our default mode without any overwhelming events. We want to stay integrated. So maintaining an interrupted state actually takes up a lot of energy and time and like tension. So your body has to keep tensing to hold back what it wants to do, right? Don't say that thing, don't say that thing, create tension here. Or your mind has to keep creating workarounds for meaning making. So that's when we worry and we ruminate. And your relationships prioritize like what's acceptable over what's true. So in time, all that effort shows up in real ways. The tension in your body, it can lead to inflammation, right? Because all that tension is creating friction, and that friction is interpreted as an injury, and that causes the body to be like, send inflammation there because there's a wound. Inflammation in short doses is great. Inflammation in long doses over a long period of time, we know that that's at the heart of every disease. And in this case, the scripts in your mind also become so embedded, right? They're on autopilot that they turn into disordered belief systems that create the architecture of how you see the world. And when you spend your life, in that dysregulated state, you're not holding yourself accountable, or you're not being authentic in your relationships, you end up performing, which leads to a lot of internal and external discord. So we've got physical disease, mental disorder, and relational discord as a result of the underlying mechanism of disconnection and dysregulation. Now, to be clear, not every physical illness, mental health struggle, or relational problem comes from unresolved stress alone. Genetics, injury, infection, access to good nutrition, lack of access to good nutrition, poverty, the climate that you're in, the culture that you're in, biology, they're all real factors too. But dysregulation, if you are in a state of dysregulation, it makes it much harder to heal and address those mechanisms. So dysregulation really is the precursor that needs to be solved so that any other interventions will actually stick. Now, sometimes dysregulated patterns get severe enough that they finally show up as something medicine can name and treat. So you develop symptoms that fit inside the paradigm of pathology. And in some cases, that is a real gift. Not a great gift, but it's still a gift because now you have access to systems for sickness that can truly help you. But many times, dysregulated patterns don't get that severe, like they don't cross the threshold. They just run low and constant, like underneath everything, never quite bad enough to be caught by a diagnosis, but never absent enough for self-care to actually fix. And that is the valley that so many of us get stuck in. So disconnection and dysregulation, that's the actual mechanism keeping us in the valley all alone, not a lack of self-care. And many times it's not an untreated illness, but instead it's a body-mind relationship system that's lost the ability to stay connected to itself and consequently in a state of dysregulation all the time. And here's what's important to understand. This isn't only a nervous system problem. Dysregulation is any place in your system where you have too much or too little of something that's supposed to be balanced. So too much bacteria in your gut, or not enough good bacteria to balance it, or too many like low frequencies caught in your biofield, not enough coherent ones moving through it. too little movement in your body or too much tension holding it still. You have chi stuck and pooling in one area, maybe depleted in another. You've got racing thoughts with nowhere to land in one way, or a mind so foggy nothing lands at all. Or being too filled up with other people's desires, or not having access to desire at all. Like, those are different areas of your system, completely different, way beyond the nervous system, but they have the same underlying pattern. Something that's supposed to flow freely gets stuck and imbalanced instead. That's all dysregulation, no matter where it shows up: body, mind, relationships, energy field, soul, and more. And this is exactly why I work across 10 different dimensions of the human system, not just the nervous system, which is where I began as a trauma therapist. Nervous system is one place where dysregulation lives, but it's not the only one. So now we know what dysregulation is and how it works, right? And what it can do in the long term. So what's the opposite of dysregulation? What does a fully connected system actually look and feel like? Well, it looks like having a connected body-mind relationship system, right? If dysregulation is a product of disconnection, then having a happy, healthy, whole system is about reconnecting it, right? Where your body, your mind, and your relationship, all the components are connecting and communicating so they can self-regulate. And self-regulation is a pretty big deal. It's actually the default of how your system is supposed to operate. I've been calling it regulation, right? Self-regulation and dysregulation, because that's the language neuroscience uses. And I think that's the language many people understand today. But neuroscience isn't the only field that's mapped this dichotomy, right? These two different states. Self-regulation is a much bigger concept that spans millennia across different fields of study. Yoga calls it alignment and misalignment. Quantum mechanics calls it coherence and incoherence. Different fields, different vocabulary, but the same underlying mechanism, which reaffirms what I just said. Self-regulation is a pretty important thing. So we're going to stick with that word regulation for now and take a second to talk about, well, why does it matter? And I would arguably say, why does it matter more than anything else in your life? Regulation isn't one element among many things that make up a happy, healthy, whole life. It's the precursor to all of them. Like, regulation isn't an ingredient. If you have a pie that's your whole life, regulation isn't an ingredient that you make in that pie. It's like the pan holding it all together, or the crust. Everything goes into a state of regulation. Every part of you is built on top of regulation. It's a byproduct of your regulated or dysregulated state. So the cells in your body, the patterns in your relationship, the electromagnetism in your biofield, even the ether of your soul. If the energy in your system isn't regulated, no matter what that energy is, your cells, your muscles, your thoughts, your beliefs, the words you say, the music you listen to, if the energy in your system isn't regulated, your system never will be well. It will constantly be a battle to feel happy and healthy. So if regulation is the thing that everything else in your life is built on top of, here's the problem. Neither of the two systems we started with today is built to create it. Systems for self-care aren't built to bring balance or regulation. Self-care maintains what's already regulated. It doesn't restore regulation once it's gone. So that's systems of self-care. They're not built to bring balance or regulation. And systems for sickness aren't built for this either. So medicine treats disease once dysregulation has gotten severe enough to be named and categorized. It doesn't address the dysregulation sitting underneath in the valley before it becomes diagnosable. Instead, it often adds some sort of synthetic intervention, whether that's a pharmaceutical or a surgery. It doesn't necessarily balance what your system already has. So again, both systems for self-care and systems for sickness are incredibly important. You need self-care as a foundational practice in your life. And if you need medical intervention, please get it. This lesson is not about substituting either system. It's about introducing you to a third system we all need to know. And that is a system for self-regulation. And it's what I've built my entire career on. Because when I went looking for it many, many years ago, it didn't exist yet. Now, I'm not saying self-regulation is new. There are wonderful practitioners already doing this work, and so many indigenous and Eastern and very, very old philosophies and practices that center self-regulation. So I'm not saying self-regulation is new. There are lots of practitioners already doing this work too: acupuncturists, yoga teachers, energy workers, nutritionists, somatic therapists, mental health counselors, shamans. All of them are helping people self-regulate different dimensions of their life every day. But what has been missing is a system that organizes and unifies all of that the way that conventional medicine, for example, organizes itself. So diagnostic criteria, treatment protocols, licensing boards, that infrastructure exists for pathology. But it's never existed for prevention in a way that would tie all of those practitioners together. Go imagine seeing your acupuncturist and then seeing your shaman and then seeing your massage therapist and having them all understand exactly what you're doing in terms of your own self-regulation. Plus, then you go home and do your own practices of self-regulation. Like, we didn't have that paradigm of prevention until I pulled it all together within my work. And the consequence of not having that paradigm, not having a paradigm that unifies all of this wonderful, holistic, preventative, self-regulating care, the consequence of not having that is that many folks like us who get stuck in the valley between self-care and sickness, we end up having to spend a lot of time, money, and energy cobbling together our own preventative care. And I know this because I had to do it myself, first of all. And then I have watched so many of my clients, my friends, my family, and my students do the same. Now, we can talk more about the unification of the wellness world and the paradigm of prevention in another video. But for now, I want to focus on the fact that you are actually the one who influences your own self-regulation. No practitioner will ever have the power to balance your system the way that you do. And that's what makes self-regulation so powerful, and a system, the necessity of a system being built around it. You don't need a diagnosis to access it. You don't need to wait for a practitioner to begin doing it. Because you own and operate your human system, you can self-regulate every single day. The feel, think, act cycle, right? The stress response cycle, that's already yours to influence all the time. This means that you are at the center of self-regulation, and the paradigm of prevention that I've built around it has you at the center. Self-regulation is something that you have agency over, which means you can start recalibrating and balancing your system at any time. You could start right now. You can notice when your microbiome feels off, when your energy feels depleted, when you're carrying someone else's desires instead of your own, when you said something you didn't mean and you want to self-correct, when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you don't want to deal with people anymore, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling irritated. Like, these are all things within your awareness, within your influence. Self-regulation is a self-governed process. And that means within the paradigm of prevention, there's a lot about your health and happiness that's already in your hands. Now, we are going to spend this whole channel talking about self-regulating practices in different ways that are very structured, very systematized, and connect a lot of different things that have been previously disconnected. So if you're looking for a lot of how-tos for self-regulating, especially through like different kinds of triggering situations, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll see the next video when it comes up. And of course, if you're interested, my book has a very specific step-by-step process you can follow anytime you're triggered in any situation. But for now, here's how you can start working with self-regulation today, immediately. Every time something changes, every time new energy shows up in some dimension of your life, your task is to notice the feeling first. And this can be kind of tricky because many of us, especially those who are very sensitive, we have learned to stop listening to our bodies. But our bodies are an incredible machine. And I say that in the most divine, incredible way possible. I don't mean to mechanize it, but your body is a sensory system. It is going to notice when new energy comes into your, what I call orb of influence, like into your orb. It affects you. And your job is to notice that feeling first. You might not know what it is yet, but just to notice it and to get really attuned with that. When your body changes, that's your signal that something has shifted. New energy has come into your orb. From there, right? That's feel. From there, you have to think. So pause long enough to let your mind build a story around what you're feeling. So notice the sensation and then sort of ask yourself, what changed? What happened? How can I make sense of that? Right? And build a story that actually helps you understand what's happening instead of running on old assumptions as much as you can. And then from there, we want to act. So we feel sensations, we think up a story, and then we act using signals. And we want that to be elevated, balanced, and loving. Ideally, we want to try to ensure that that action is based on what you actually felt in your body and what you actually thought in your mind, not whatever your system defaults to when nobody's paying attention, right? Because we need the feel, think, act cycle to be connected. Because here's the thing. The feel, think, act cycle runs whether you're conscious of it or not. And if you leave it on autopilot, oftentimes it's going to disconnect. But just simply pulling your attention into your feel, think, act cycle, noticing what you're feeling in your body, thinking up a story to explain that, and then having an aligned action, that can actually help you stay in that integrated process rather than being dominated by interrupted patterns over and over and over again. The moment you become conscious of that cycle, even after watching this video, you will see yourself differently because once awareness happens, it can't go away. So the moment you become conscious of the feel, think, act cycle, and you recognize that you are in control of it, you'll actually notice when you feel out of control. And that is a step in the process. Like you're not going to be able to totally override your autopilot and your default mode right away. But when you notice it, even when you notice that it's taking you somewhere where you don't want it to go, you recognize that, oh, there's a gap between what I automatically say and do and here. And what is that gap? That's your influence. That's your agency. So you hold the ability to influence your feel, think, act cycle so that everything happens to you becomes something that works for you. That is alchemy. Alchemy is what lets you turn pain into purpose, trauma into triumph, and stress into a superpower. So here's how all of this explains why you're still sick even after trying everything. Dysregulation is at the heart of physical, mental, and relational problems. Systems for self-care were never designed to address dysregulation. They maintain wellness. Systems of sickness were also never designed to address dysregulation. They provide medicine to make you well once you're sick enough. Neither of these systems touch the disconnection and dysregulation that lie at the core of all of our problems. Instead, they leave a significant valley many of us fall into. Self-regulation is what fills that gap, not just nervous system regulation, but regulation that addresses all dimensions of your human experiences. The system for self-regulation is what you and the entire wellness industry has been missing all along. And you can start bringing this into your life by beginning the practice of being more aware of how you feel, think, and act in every situation. Now, we only scratched the surface of what's to learn about systems for self-regulation, but I hope that this was a helpful introduction for you today. Feel, think, act is at the core of my own alchemical self-regulation practice, and it's how I became more happy, healthy, and whole when I realized that I was stuck in a valley between systems and I had to build my own understanding of how to get myself out of that valley. So I really encourage you to try out the feel, think, act flow. And I know it's going to seem super simple, but mastering that flow is truly at the core of becoming more happy, healthy, and whole. And everything in the system of self-regulation builds around that. Thank you so much for listening and watching today. If you'd like to continue learning, you can watch this video next. Until next time, take care of you.